herself and what she does. Thank you so much for coming this morning.
Thank you guys.
And we do have refreshments over here if you're interested.
And then also over here on the table, it's different information about Preservation Maryland. And also today, our program, Researching Your Historic House, it's, some sort of timer is on. There we go. This workshop comes out of the creation of this property research guide, which is basically what we're walking through today, all of the key documents that you should consult if you're doing the history of your property, or preparing a landmark nomination, whether it's a local landmark or a National Register nomination. And this all came out of a project that we're doing in Brunswick, the Berlin House, where it was a really unconventional story of this property, and it took several of us staff members to figure out the documents of what actually happened here at this building. So that was such a learning experience for us that we thought we should put this information down for someone else to learn from. So we have that research property guide. I have a couple of copies printed out here on the table for you if you're interested in taking it today. But everyone who signed up today is going to get a follow-up email with links to all of the things that we're going to talk about. So you'll have those copies afterwards. And I encourage you to go find this blog on our website. The Berlin House story is very, very fascinating. It was owned by this woman for a long time. She ran a kind of boarding house, and she would bake things for the train tracks and the railroad workers that would be stopping right there. It's a really cute story, fascinating story about that house and the work that we're doing with the city to preserve it. All right. So into researching your property. So the first thing that you need to do before you start your research is figure out what are your goals, right? Are you doing this research for a regulatory purpose, or are you just doing it for your own edification, for your family's, history information? That doesn't necessarily going to change the types of information you're going to look for or the types of documents you're going to consult, but it is going to affect how you record keep, right? If your end goal is that regulatory document or some sort of academic level document that you want other people to be able to use as a research guide in the future, you're writing the history of your house, you intend to keep it with the house, pass it on to the next owner or to your family if the house stays in the family, you want to make sure that you're keeping record keeping at a certain level, certain types and styles. So you want to be mindful of that before you start your research so that you are keeping track of where did this document come from? When did you get this document? And having that organization of there, right? So for, looking at that academic side of researching that, using this research to create a nomination, here's just some examples of how I personally, in my 20 years of researching properties, my first job out of college, I was the communications staff at a little local nonprofit preservation firm. So I would schedule the tours and do the fundraising emails, things like that. But they knew that I liked it, preservation, and so I was put in charge of the plaque program. So right from undergrad, leaving undergrad through today, I've been researching buildings since day one. Something that a mentor of mine taught me was a basic spreadsheet, right? But using the specialness of Excel to help you sort and categorize all of that. So I have a column for the year, just the year, so that I can have everything in chronological order, because that's really important to make sure that you're doing the timeline correctly. And then I can have a column that has the specific date of whatever that thing is. That certainly helps when you're finding newspaper records or there's some sort of other ephemera that is tied to a specific date. I kind of just put general January 1st when it's some sort of regulatory document that's an undated thing, like city directories. Who knows every year what year they come out, so it's just kind of the year. And then I color code the type of document it is, so that visually when I'm looking at my list, I can see, oh, I got too many of this type of resource. Why don't I have more of this type of resource? So that I'm getting that fuller picture of not just the architectural and development history of the resource, but also that social and cultural history of the resource. We want both of those things. No matter what your end goal is, we want to be able to tell both of those tandem stories because they intertwine and connect, right? You have a reason, you know that your house has an addition on it. Who knows why that addition was added? Well, if you're doing your research of the people who live there, you can see from one census to another that they had a bunch of babies in between that time period, and that's probably why that addition was added at that time period. So it all kind of helps. And then the same in your actual documents. So much of this is going to be able to be done digitally, be able to be done online. So you're going to have lots of files to manage. So again, I like to do the year in the first, because for me, chronological order is paramount. And then I'll put some sort of category word there, and then whatever title or whatever makes sense to me to help me understand what that document is, right? You're still going to be able to click on it and see what it is. But being organized from the get-go is so, so important. I've been cocky so many times thinking like, I know what's happening and I can just jump in the middle or just do it, and then every time it falls apart and I make a mess. Sorry, there was another slide there. All right, so these are the key documents that you want to consult when you are doing property research, whether it's your own personal home, whether it's a commercial building, it doesn't matter what the resource is, and it doesn't necessarily have to be buildings, right? Any resource that's on land that has been purchased, we can use these types of documents to be able to track them. So first and foremost is you want to check previous survey work. We're going to obviously go through all of these. Previous survey work and the current data. So we want to know what's happening right now with that resource and what previous research might have been done. Then we want to go to our deeds. That's the next most important thing. The deed is doing that chain of title on the property is going to give you that skeleton, that framework for all the other data to go into it. Why can't you just jump to newspapers or censuses? Because how do you know who's living there? How do you know who owned it? You don't know all of the names that you could be searching in those resources. So you need that skeleton of those property owners. Just because they owned it doesn't mean they lived in it. So there's still going to be some fun investigating that's going to be necessary, but we at least need that framework there. Next is going to be maps. And again, I like to do maps second because a lot of those older maps and atlases aren't actually going to be fairly geographically accurate, but they're going to use the property owner's name as an identifier. So again, you need to know who was owning it at certain times so that you know that you're looking at the right spot on the map. Tax assessments and permits. Incredibly important, and that's why it's kind of higher up on the list, but it's also lower on the list because these documents are the ones that are the most inconsistent of surviving. We'll talk about it when we get to that point, but if you can find these things, the information in it is like solid gold. It will answer and solve so many problems and issues for you. But it is just few and far between and a lot more difficult to make sense of that information because municipality districts change and voting elections and how they would categorize who you would file those things with change over time. So you'll have to track. It might not actually be in your town name now. It might have been with a different municipality that was collecting those documents at that time period. So it's a little jumbled up. And then last is going to be those census and newspapers and other ephemera type things, because again, once you've done all that other research, you have all the possible names that you could be searching for, all the property variations of addresses, all of that hardcore data, the stagnant data, that you can then figure out all the fluffy stuff that you can find from these fun things, right? All right, so let's get into the weeds on each of these types of documents. So previous survey work. When I say survey work, I'm talking about preservation planning efforts. So that is historic structure reports, historic cultural resource surveys, anything that was done on a geographic area for research. And the best place, the only place really, to get all of that kind of information is on Maryland Historical Trust's website through their Medusa program. It's basically just a souped up Google map. You put in your address here. You see I'm using our building in Baltimore as the example. Meadow Mill, the former home of London fog raincoats. We're in that building. It's super cool. So you can look it up, and all of the different layers relate to a different type of document. So the dark purple line means that it's been listed in the National Register. So you'll be able to click and look at the actual PDF of the actual nomination. You can look at it from a database view. There's different ways that you can look at it. The red lines relate to MIHP forms, Maryland Inventory of Historic Properties. So that's just an inventory form, but you have to keep in mind that up until very recently, honestly, when there has been a separate actual inventory form, they've just used National Register forms for inventory forms back in the day. So when you click on that, most often you're just going to see a drafted and a National Register nomination that just never was submitted or wasn't full enough to be submitted. They're just using that form as the inventory form. So don't get confused if you see that it's a National Register form when you've clicked on the MIHP. That's totally normal. I had a call this week from someone who was upset that they couldn't do certain things because they thought they were listed in the National Register, but no, it was an inventory form only. It had never been submitted to the National Register. But this is awesome. Play around with this. This is great. Not every building, I mean, it's pretty comprehensive because we are a small state. MHT has done a pretty good job at scanning and getting these documents into the system. So there's lots of data here. But there's still going to be data on the local level. So local historical societies might have the hard copies of these, or previous survey work that was only done at a local level and never sent up to the state to be formally scanned. I was talking with friends up in Hartford County, and they had their own county preservation commission had done regular inventories and inventorying of buildings and documentation, but they didn't actively send them to the state. So they actually have a pile of way more information than what you'd find on Medusa. So keeping that in mind, this was the slide for everything I just said. Sometimes your local regulators will have information as well. So, there's the County Preservation Commission that you can talk to, and then these two separate communities also have preservation commissions. Who knows what their internal rules of record keeping are? I can't speak that they'll have tons of information available for you, but it might be existing there. Also, current and recent-ish tax assessment records are going to be kept at your local municipality level. So if there's issues about a recent change in the property, you could see how, the tax assessment record in 1970 versus 1972 are very, very different. So that's probably when that addition happened. Or if they have more recent permitting, not historic permitting, because it's probably unlikely, but maybe more recent permitting, that'll answer some questions there too. Other current data to check is going to be the tax assessment website. So the state website is called SDAT, S-D-A-T, SDAT. It's amazing. Again, we were kind of chatting, a few of us, before everyone got here. This is my 4th state that I've worked in. Maryland, small but mighty, access to public records is incredibly impressive. There is no way in the other 3 states that I worked at to as quickly and easily to get current tax assessment records as this is. So you go to the main page, you select which county, and then there's different ways that you can search. And it depends on the county. Not all counties have the same search, but you're definitely going to be able to search by the name of the property owner, the previous seller sometimes. Some counties, and Talbot is one of them, allows you to search by address, so that's nice. But not all the counties let you search by address.
And is that free?
Yes, 100% free. There's no sign-in. And if there is a sign-in, it's a free account. Because now I'm thinking my computer might just automatically log me into it. Right. It's not a login. It's just the land records is the one that has sign-in. All right. So totally free, awesome. SDAT, that's literally what I type into Google every time. It's the first thing that pops up. When you put in your property, so you fill in the form and you get to this page is what it's going to look like. And again, I'm using where we are right now or across the street as the example. So over here at the top, you'll see it'll give you the current owner's name, the historical society, and their mailing address if it's separate from the current. Deed reference up here at the top, and it'll also be this first thing that you see here. It's going to reference and give you the most recent deed. So there you have your first deed that you can look up to start your chain going backwards. So that's almost 99% of the time is going to be the most accurate. If it's been a very recent sale, there might be a little bit of a delay getting it in there, but you always want to check here to confirm your current most recent deed. It's also going to give you the legal description of that property as it's legally described today. For communities like, even for Talbot, for being in a rural community compared to being in Baltimore or Annapolis or parts closer to DC, those urban communities, those property lines have not changed since the beginning, right? A property line in downtown Baltimore, except for where the fire was, those property lines have stayed the same. So when you're going backwards, especially in a more rural community, you need to be paying attention to your lot description because that property has probably been subdivided over time. So we want to make sure that not only through the property ownership, title, chain of title that we're following the right property, but we want to use the property lot description to make sure that we're following the right one. That has definitely happened to me multiple times where I was not paying attention to that. And I'm going backwards to that deed where it was subdivided into 5. And I accidentally took a wrong turn and went the wrong way instead of the right way or whatever. So we want to always pay attention to the lot. And then here it'll give you more information about that most recent deed of, you'll have the number again, and sometimes it'll include a price, sometimes it won't. Not all deeds have prices on them. More recent deeds usually do, but historic deeds, it's very, very hit or miss on what it'll include in there. So this is all of those first step things that we want to do to just get the lay of the land. What did we already kind of figure out about this building? What is its situation today? Then we can start going backwards with our deed. We want to trace the ownership, chain of title. Most of you would have gotten a title search if you're doing this for your own property, you would have had a title search in your purchase paperwork. Sometimes those documents are absolutely impossible to read or make sense of. Sometimes they'll just be they won't actually be in chronological order. It's just like a whole bunch of deeds. So that document could definitely be helpful, but sometimes it's not helpful anyway. And again, they're just making sure you have clean title, that there's no other issues with it, right? They're just looking for that legal clearing. They're not looking for the things or paying attention to the things that you're looking for. So again, that's a great thing to have, but we definitely want to not rely on it as if it's 100% truth. There might be other little sales that got lost in the shuffle because it didn't impact the legality of the sale. So it's about going backwards, and even most experienced researchers get confused and tripped up sometimes. So, here's our little chart. We start with your current owner. Who did they buy it from? They bought it from John Doe. So when we want to figure out when John Doe bought it, we then need to look his name in the grantee index for when he was the grantee. And then it'll tell us who his grantor was. That was Katie. So then we have to then look in the grantee indexes for that year and before and see when Katie might have purchased it from her grantor, and so on and so forth. Again, every time that I've been so sure of myself and I start in the middle of a chain of title and I think I got it, I always mess it up. So always start from the beginning and go backwards. This is also important and helpful. I had a property one time where it was 2 couples, and they operated a boarding house out of the building, and they sold it back and forth to each other. I don't even know how many times in like a matter of 5 years. Clearly some shenanigans were up. And then eventually it was clear in the deeds that those 2 couples divorced and married each other's spouses and then sold the building again. So it was like the most epic chain of title that I've ever dealt with in my whole entire life. So again, being clear going backwards. There was another property that I dealt with. It was up in Western New York a long time. It was like a Mennonite family that had come up to Western New York at the Erie Canal era and homesteading, and had bought big land on scene and came to homestead. Every single man in that family was called Jacob. So and they passed it through the family for decades, from the 1805 through to the present day, basically. So again, you can have your chain of, it was Jacob Akelben or it was some crazy German name, I can't remember, with multiple syllables. And it was like impossible. So like I got the chain of title, but then all the other stuff, research, the census and stuff, helped me figure out, well, which Jacob am I actually talking about here? They all married either Elizabeths or Marys too. So it was like absolutely impossible. Something to keep in mind, again, it's not always going to tell you money. Sometimes it's awesome if it does. Sometimes in the newspaper, when you search that for that year, you know when the sale happened. If you look at the newspaper for that time, sometimes the newspaper will say, especially post World War II time period, or between even World War I and onward, that was a steady column in the newspaper, was permits issued by the town or municipality and sales and how much, just like today. Although they weren't like caring about people's personal, like they really just printed whatever information. And even if it does have money, sometimes that money isn't accurate. You see a lot of deeds that say $1. And that's just like a legalese thing. It just says $1 because a money exchange has to happen. And there's also old wives' tales that go around that when people didn't want to put money in the deed because then they'd have to pay taxes on whatever was written in the deed. So there's lots of moving parts of why, whatever, but it pains me so much when I see like things on the internet, like little goofy videos or whatever saying, oh, I found my house and they only bought it for $1. Isn't that great? No, they bought it for more money. It wasn't $1. I've noticed since I've been in Maryland that I've seen a lot of deeds that say $5. It's the first time that I've seen $5 as the standard money thing. $1 is almost always what I've seen. So I don't know what the story behind that is, but that's a weird Maryland thing I've seen.
Does that sometimes mean it was transferred to your cousin? Maybe not a direct descendant.
No, honestly, I've seen
I'll
it both
sell
ways.
you the old family house for $1.
No, I mean,
No?
again, I think it's some sort of weird legal thing that.
Yeah, there has to be consideration.
Yeah, there has to be
So
some
put
sort
it
of
out.
sale. Like it can't be free. You can't just pass it on.
Right.
So I think it's just handwriting.
I've
If
seen
in
boats-
person,
I've seen boats sold for $1 because
Right.
Essentially you were giving it to somebody.
right? But even
But it has to have.
but that is fewer and far between. That is the actuality. What really is probably most often happen is that it just says that $1 there for the sake of saying $1, and the financial transaction happens separate, and they paid them real money for that house. So it, don't always take it as truth, as gospel if it says money. And it's probably not going to tell you anything about the building itself. It's not. They're selling the land. The building is a secondary thing. The building is temporary. It could disappear tomorrow if a tree falls on it. So very rarely are you going to have a deed that even mentions the building. If you have deeds that have deed restrictions, especially if we're going back to a certain period of time before racial before that was illegal, you might see some things about the building and other horrible things of saying that it wasn't allowed to be sold to people of certain ethnicity, to specifically Black people or other ethnicities. So there might be other things that are in there, but rarely do you get mentions of the actual building itself. And then I don't think it's going to be a problem for you guys out here, but it is something to be, and this like blew my mind when I moved here and I started learning how to research in Maryland, ground rent and ground leases. This is mostly in Baltimore City, Baltimore County-ish, and a little bit in Annapolis. This is an old-timey English thing, and they brought it here in the colonial time period. And it's actually still technically how land works in England. I just recently found through a TikTok that I saw where to make housing affordable, the lord or the landowner keeps the ownership of the land, but you're buying the use of the land and the house on it. So there's a lot of property owners in Baltimore City who own their house, but pay a ground rent to the person who owns the land. There's state programs that have been created to help, because that can be really expensive to buy and be able to outright own your building and not have a separate landowner under you, literally, figuratively. So there are state programs to help low-income property homeowners to purchase their lease back. But it's slowly getting away, and you can see in deed work through the 50s, 60s, and 70s where homeowners are trying to buy back their ground leases and match it so that you're just buying it outright. Again, I haven't seen any of that over here on the Eastern Shore, but just something to be aware of, especially if you're going back really early. There might, if you're looking at 1600 records, 1700 records, there might be mentions of ground rent. Maybe it just went away way earlier out here than it did. It's still holding on for dear life in Baltimore. Yes.
$5. Quick claims.
Yes.
Here at Easton, we're at $4 for a long time. So I think what you're seeing is that they sold it for $1 and also the clerk fees have been paid.
Ah, that's smart. See, you learn something every day, man.
Oh, that helps.
No, that totally helps. But again, it just emphasizes how, you know, unless you have got a unicorn of a deed that says they bought it for $30,000 or whatever, it's going to be some weird random number that meets, you know, whatever it needs to be, that you have to have a financial exchange. And,
Talk to the court and
Yeah.
I give the dude money.
yeah, it's over. Oh, man. So when you pull up a deed, obviously every time period deeds are going to look different. And depending on the time period of the deed, the way that you're looking at it is going to be different. If you're looking at a microfilm, that's probably going to be scans of the original handwritten books or typewritten books. More modern deeds are just going to be scanned like PDFs, and you'll be able to look at it. But generally speaking, here is that deed that was referenced on the tax assessment for the Historical Society across the street. And so we just color-coded to find those key identifiers that we want to find in every deed that we look at. So we want to make sure that we are on the right page and book number, Lieber and page number. That's how the deeds are stored. They are in numbered books. It's a whole, I can't remember the name of the filing system, but it's a patented filing system thing of how they organize the deeds by the last name and then put them in the books. It's super cool. You'll figure it out when you're doing the deed research. There's little charts that'll show you. But when you get to your page, make sure that you are on the correct one. This first statement here is going to give you obviously the date that the deed was executed. It's going to have a separate recorded date. My experience so far here in Maryland, that hasn't been a big deal. In other states, there's a more significant delay or other rules about how you have to wait between signing, executing, and recording or something like that. So in other states that I've worked in, it's been more of a prominent thing where I have to note when it was executed versus when it was recorded. So far in my experience in Maryland, it hasn't really mattered. Everyone just kind of uses the date that it was executed. But it'll clarify who the parties are, right? So grantor is who is selling it, grantee is who is buying it. This middle section here, this little arrow needs to be pointing up here, apologize. Here with the beginning, that is your key, that is your property description, and it's your property description for the thing. You want to make sure that you are copying this from each deed and making sure that it is describing the same property. Once that property description changes, you either have the wrong deed or some funny business happened. It's been subdivided and we need to make sure that we're on the right one, right? So we have to make sure that we're following that. As we get closer to modern times, you'll start to see here at the end of here also a reference to that official lot description, that simple description that we saw in the current tax assessment records. But that's going to be a little bit later on that they start incorporating those into the descriptions. If you are lucky, again, previous sale, if you are lucky, your deed will reference your previous sale. Hit or miss since I moved to Maryland on that being included in deeds. Back in New York, it is almost always in deeds, having that previous deed reference. If it references, awesome. You've saved you a time of having to look in the indexes to find the next deed, but it's not always accurate, right? It's not always the actual most recent deed. This might just be the one where they bought it from, the original family owner bought it from the previous owner. There could still be more little weird deeds in between where it was just cousin passing to cousin or whatever. And they might not have referenced that because it's still in the same ownership. So again, you do want to double check to make sure that there aren't any funny business in between there, but that's awesome that it'll give you that previous deed reference. How we find deeds. Again, if you have local institutions that have copies of those, awesome sauce, that's great. But MD land records, this is the most glorious thing in the entire world. Again, we were talking about this before most of you came in. I've worked in 4 states now. No state that I have worked in has one unified place where you can find all the deeds of your state. In New York State, we have 60-something counties. You have to go to each individual county and do that research in person. Maybe they'll have a online thing. New York loves fees. So most of those counties, you have to pay $15 to get a day pass to search their online records. Maryland, you have to make a free account and you can access all of this. So you have to create your account, so you have your login here, and you can get in there. So you get into the system, you select your county that you want to search in, and this is what that landing page is going to look like when you select Talbot County, right? So on the left-hand side is going to be all the different ways that we can search and all the different indexes that are available. We're going to walk through those in a second. And then here's your main search page. So if you come to this page and you went to SStat and you got your current deed number, right? You can just enter it right in there, press go, and it'll take you straight to that scanned document. Sometimes here in Maryland, they also add clerk letters to the book and page number. Again, every book is going to have the letters, but I think it's been more of a urban environment thing that it's been necessary to put that number in, because there might have been multiple books during 1 year, or that the volume is just so much that there's multiple books and multiple clerks that came through. But from my Eastern Shore researching I've done, it hasn't been that big of a deal about that. But if you look at a book and page number and there's 3 letters in front of it, that's what that is. It's the initials of the clerk that was working at that time period that all of these records are being filed under. So it's literally that dude's initials. That's what those 3 letters mean. So if you have it, you can put it in there, boom. You don't know what it is and you need to search for it, then you can put search by name. So like the landing page is going to automatically give you that individual grantor name, but you can also select to search by a corporation name. So if you wanted to put in Talbot Historical Society, you'd have to click on the corporate search. You can't put it as the last name on the individual search. It won't work. So you can use that. But the key thing, and this is going to be different for every county, you need to pay attention to what time bracket these records are going to be from. So anything that you put on and try to search from this main page, you're only going to be able to access 1966 through today on this main page. Okay? If you want to access things that are from before that time period, that's when you have to click the active indices. Indexes, that's a silly word. And every county is going to be different, and this drop-down menu will show you what are the other indexes that are going to be available for you. When you search on the previous page, everything that was from 1966 to today is going to be a nice clean kind of PDF, nice scanned. These ones are 99% going to be microfilms. That you're going to have to navigate like you would on a computer, on like a viewer, but in the computer screen. There's a learning curve on this website, not going to lie. And especially once you get into these other indexes and you're navigating through the microfilm, the forward button you think is the forward button to take you to the next page might actually be the next roll of films. So for example's sake, I clicked, I think it was the grantor, the bottom one. So grantors from 1959 to 1992. And then this is the page that showed up. And I just clicked on this, did I do? Yeah. So I just clicked on this first roll. So this first thing is going to show me the grantor indexes for 1959 to 1965 for A through D. So it's going to be every person that sold their property during that time bracket that had last names of A to D.
For that one deed?
For that, no, this is all of the county deeds. For
All the
Talbot.
property transfers?
All the property transfers from 1959 to 1992 for just those letters.
And those letters are the grantor's name?
Grantor. So if you're the person who sold it, its name is Adams, and you know the sale happened in 1960, that's the one you're going to click because they sold it in 1960 and their last name starts with A. Again, that's why the chart and the organization is super necessary. And then just to give you an idea of what it's going to look like when you're looking on these active indexes, it's going to be the microfilm. So this is where you'll see all the pages in your roll. And you can jump ahead, this is a small one because it's a small county, there weren't that many sales during that time period. But if you move to a different community, or a different county, I've opened ones in Frederick County that were 300 scanned slides, having to navigate and figure out where's my letter, and then once you get to your letter, what does it show? So the confusion thing is that this next button, Sometimes the next button will send you to the next roll. Like, so this is A to D, it'll take you to D through whatever, but sometimes it doesn't. So again, like, slow and steady wins the race on this website. And then just a close-up of what this page is actually saying. So it's all of, so Anthony, Austin, Adkins, these are the people who sold it, and then it's on page 85 of that book. So this is just the index. So it tells you which book and page you need to go to see the deed where Adkins sold the property. That's why organization is so important. It gets really, really crazy. And this is kind of what I was alluding to before. There is like this set way of organizing documents from this time period of doing it by letters and having the brackets, because you never know who's going to come in and sell it. So you can't make it like nice and pretty alphabetical order right from the get-go, right? So it's this whole system of bracketing the letters together. And if you start with a letter and you have a second letter of whatever vowels, all of them are put together. So you're looking at a section that has all the names that start with B-R-A. They're all together in whatever order they came into the office, but that's how they're going to organize it so we can find it in alphabetical. It's cuckoo crazy pants. It's very difficult, but once you get the hang of it, it's super duper easy. That's all I can say.
So you have to know the name.
Yeah, you have to know your first name, and you might not know, who bought it. So then if you don't know who sold it, you can then go to the grantor index and look up that person and when they bought it, and then it'll tell you who the grantor was, and then you flip-flop and do it the opposite way.
That's that name is not the last name, it's the first name of the individual. Is that what you're saying?
It's going to be by their last name. It's going to be
Right,
organized by their last name,
okay.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
MD Land Rec?
Yeah. I'll go back.
I just pulled it
Yeah,
up.
mdlandrex.net.
Third David Reed.
Doesn't matter, thanks.
And this is, again, a partnership. I went and looked up the law. Like, it was a law, I think it was in the 80s, where the state archives and the state got together and said, all the counties have to send us this data. And then they've been building this website. So all of the historic stuff has pretty much been caught up by now. And then as new deeds are filed, I forget, there's like a cutoff. Like, they have to send them within a year or whatever, and all of it has to be. But now it's all digital anyway, so it gets in there really easy. All right, crash course through deeds is completed. Again, you're gonna get links in a follow-up email with links to all of these things. I have also done this workshop before, so there is a pre-recorded version of the same thing on the website, and we're recording tonight, so you'll be able to come back to check as well. All right, let's go talk about maps for a second. So when we talk about maps, we're talking about atlases, plat maps. So plat maps are going to be, land record maps, like the lot dimensions, and then Sanborn fire insurance maps. That is the best. We all want Sanborns for our community. They are the best maps ever.
And we have one here for
yes, you do. And we are so
30s,
blessed.
40s maybe?
Yeah, and I think the one I saw for the earliest one you guys have is 1912. I think I put a picture of it on the next slide. Because we are so close to DC, we are very spoiled, and so many of our regular state records are at the Library of Congress. So there's full color ones for all the years at the Library of Congress. I'm pretty sure I checked that it looked like it was pretty complete for you guys. Again, coming from New York and Louisiana and Tennessee, Library of Congress never had anything of our stuff, especially out in the boonies or whatever. So to have so much of our state stuff available free through Library of Congress is awesome. If you are doing this for purpose of nomination, for academic, for this formal research kind of thing, this is the goal. We want to be able to have enough maps that we can visually document the building through time, especially if there have been changes to the building. So this is that building that we wrote the blog about, the Berlin House. And so you can see that over all the different maps, these just happen to all be Sanborn maps, but there might have been Atlas ones in there too. We can see the evolution and changes happening to this building to get it to what it is today, right? We definitely 1000% need that for National Register nomination. You should have that in local nominations. A lot of municipalities are lax about that, but it would make permit review so much easier if you knew the full development history of your building. So this is the goal, but this is not reality for everybody. There is not going to be a full, beautiful line of maps for every single building. So it's what you can get, where you can get it. There are a couple of county atlases, and especially here in the collection, I'm sure there are. So there's county level atlases from all different time periods, and then here is the 1912 Sanborn map. And I was just super confused trying to figure out where we were, just because I'm the worst at figuring out things. And the numbering is different, so I couldn't figure out which we were. So this is generally the block that we are in.
Go show her, Kayla.
Yes, please show us. Like, is this corner? It's that corner. Okay.
And most of these, with the exception of Dover Street that leans over there, most of these are all 90-degree angles. The ones I've been dealing with are, oh my goodness, go north 5.7 degrees for 75 feet, then turn west.
Yeah.
Wait till you get like a
Go
farm
tree.
one and it references a tree
Yeah,
and that
right.
tree doesn't
Oh,
exist
yeah.
anymore
Oh.
and you're just like, I don't care.
That's
Like,
what I-
it's the same property.
Yeah.
Like, I don't
Or to the market, which may or may not be.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, these are, I'm talking 1700.
Yeah, and then chains. You have to do the math because it's going to measure it in chains and inches,
Yes,
which are not.
rods and chains.
Yeah, rods and chains. So like then you have to do the math of what that actually means in real
Yeah.
measurements. So no, it's a debacle.
And we have that map
Oh, that's
right here. If
excellent.
people wanna come look at it, it's got all of the county in
Awesome.
here.
How far back does that go?
This is 1877.
This is the
Oh, that's too late for some of mine.
Yeah, this is the cover map that for that one. Like, and then it has separate pages for each town or village depending on how they broke it up. These are going to be, this is definitely going to be an adventure where you're going to go to different repositories and see what they have. In the research guide that you'll get a copy of either in person or the digital copy I'll email you to, I include a lot of those big institutions that have a lot of collections. So your local historical society, the Maryland room. I mean, pretty much every local library has a Maryland room as their local history room. So they might have documents. The county clerk's office might have these. Your permitting office, your code enforcement, whatever that, the planning office, depending on what you guys name it, they might have some of the historic things. Other institutions outside of your community might have them. Johns Hopkins Library has tons of maps from all over the state. The Pratt Library System, even though it's the Baltimore City Library, they have tons of available things. And then through the amazing state program where all of the public libraries are connected, you should be able to access even the things that are behind like the library card wall on the Pratt Library. But I also have given my library card to several people so they can access some of those things. So as long as you don't get me fines, I'm sure to let you borrow my library card as well. But you should be able, through your own county library card, be able to access those same things. There's a reciprocal agreement with all the public library cards. That's why when there was that underground fire in Baltimore a couple months ago, it was by the library and it ruined the internet connection. And so there were so many public libraries across the state that were out and couldn't get access to certain databases because the hub is the central library. So we're all connected. So you want to check out maps, whatever you can get, whatever you can find. With the Sanborn maps, there's a couple of different places that you can get them online through different library cards for free. Library of Congress is going to be the full color, and if you look at it in person, you're going to have a full color, but there's a lot of places that give you just the black and white scanned copies. That still works and is fine, but the color coding means something. Pink is masonry buildings, stone or brick. Blue is concrete, yellow is wood frame. So when you look at the black and white ones, you're losing some of that information. Also, every single piece of writing on here means something. So it's because the whole point of this map is a fire insurance map. So it's to evaluate the buildings for insurance values, certainly, but it's also used by the fire department to assess properties if there is a situation. So there's markers of where roof structures are, showing the roof structures. There's going to be markers of where plumbing is and things of that nature, chimneys. There's all sorts of, every time I look at it, I have to look back at the key to remind myself what that weird mark means. So wealth of information in these maps. If you can get access to the color one, it's a lot easier to look at them that way. And when you look at them in person, so they'll make a map, it'll be, whatever date it's stamped is the base map, but they had to pay for these, right? So on your local level, they are going to be correcting them in time when buildings change. So when you're looking at them online, you might not necessarily see the seam of where a paper has been pasted over, but in person you'll be able to see like, oh, something happened here, so that you want to double make sure to go backwards and see the previous map, what changed, what happened to that building, because in person they'll just cover it up with a new map.
Do fire departments, when they're on a call, do they reference maps?
I think in the before times, I think yes. I think just with computers and all of that stuff now, and now there's much more regulation of signage on the exterior of buildings to show where pipes and things are. So like I think that helps. But no, I mean it's always been relayed to me in situations where like they were used at the local level. They would have been used, the planning or the city permitting office would have also had a copy, so that if someone comes in, they can see, because not every building is going to have building plans on file already. So no, they were definitely well-used resources for the corporate side of things, the capitalistic side of the insurance thing, and then also on the regulatory side too. But yeah, I'm almost positive Library of Congress has most years. I mean, you look at other communities, I think they started in the 1880s. I think is the earliest one. So you don't have, you weren't big enough to make the company want to make a map for you, because they needed to make money off these maps. So it's not until communities got a certain size that they started making them for them. So 1912 is the earliest one for you guys.
What is the one up there that you had?
This is 1912, it's from the first one.
Oh, okay.
The other thing to check is plat maps. This is definitely few and far between kind of thing. It's another free website from the state that you can get into, plats.net. They link to each other, MREC, MDREC, LandRecs, and plat maps, so like you can even just click on the link on each page. But with this one, you need to know the plat number. Like you need to know that map exists and what its reference number and stuff is to be able to enter it into that website to find. So for example, the property that we were researching in Brunswick, it's called the Berlin House. We were looking through the deeds, and the deed referenced being the same property in this previous sale and on this plat map. And it gave us the number in the deed. So then we took that number, we were in person at the archive, so we just gave it to the librarian to pull it up. But we could have gone to this website, entered the number, and then here is that plat map. So when you're having subdivisions back in historic times, the plat map is that extra deed to show to the Department of Public Works or whatever what is physically happening there, so they can do that regulatory aspect of it. Sometimes you'll have them filed with the deeds, but really no. It's a rare thing that you'll have the accompanying map, which would be required in that legal transaction, but you're not actually going to see it in the deed book, right? They're just trying to save pages in there and just have the deeds. So then you'll reference it, and then you'll go to the plat books in there. But again, you need to have, you can't just scroll through plat maps. I mean, that would be super cool. I mean, I guess you could if you just put random numbers in and just like, but there's no just like flipping pages looking for yours. And then this is also where, talking to your local county clerk's office or your local municipality, if they have records, they might be more inclined to have these, because they'll be with all their subdivision maps and stuff like that. So they might have this on a local level. Just more maps. So this is an example of Cambridge. And again, you'll have, the typical thing is if it's a bigger city, there'll be a gorgeous nameplate, and it'll be, you know, the Baltimore one, it's like this big, huge, beautiful Baltimore engraved thing, and it's like a gorgeous first page, and then this is the second page. But for you smaller communities, it's just straight away, just a little blip of the cute name in the corner. So you'll have the highlighted of which pages they're on. So that's what this first index is that this neighborhood is gonna be on page 15, 11, whatever. And then there's also an index by street name that'll tell you the street name, and then it'll have the house numbers, which house numbers are on which page, and then you can look it up that way. And then here, for reference, is just what the black and white ones that are scanned look like. Obviously, the colored ones are just so much more prettier and nicer, but the black and white ones get the job done too. All right, crash course of maps. Onward to tax assessments and permits. Again, these are forced on the list because it's just few and far between of whether or not you'll find it for your house. So for present day tax assessment records, you're gonna go to that SDAT website. Oh, I meant to flip-flop these pictures. The SDAT website, or your local municipality and what records that they still have in-house of tax assessments. So for the present things, and by present I mean from today through 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, depending on your municipality, they might still have those records in-house. Again, depending on the questions that you have or the story of your building, that might be helpful. The circuit courts is who is gonna have that records if they have them. They might be the original books, they might be scanned. It's really kind of a mixed bag. And then the Maryland State Archives will have it. Again, in the Property Research Guide, we list it out. They have on the Maryland State Archives website an index to government records. And you can go and click what type of record. And when you click the tax assessment heading, it has all of the different tax assessment records they have in-house in collection at the archives. Some of them are digitized, most of them are not. It's sort of a mishmashy list. It's theoretically in order by county, but sometimes it's out of order. There were lots of time brackets that they said they had records for Talbot County. Who knows what of Talbot, what those look like. This picture that you see here is the tax assessment record that we found for the Berlin house that we were doing the blog on. So because at that time period, it kind of shifted from two different counties, and there was some shenanigans with municipality lines. So it actually took us quite a while because the district names and numbers they used, the map didn't exist for us to be able to figure out where she might be. So we did literally, because we had the book, we were in the archives, we flipped through and looked for every name that made sense. And then we finally found her. Her name was Mary something, I can't remember all, but this listed all of her, what does it say? Mary McDonald. And it listed her tax assessment for those different years. So it's the value of the house. It's also going to probably tell you the value of the livestock and agricultural things. It might also tell you the value of the interior valuables, the real property and the personal property. Each county, each municipality kind of tracked their own things. They had to track the value of the land and the building, but they could have at different times tracked other things. My favorite example from back in New York, they passed a law where the pigs were getting out of control, and there was a law where you had to tax pigs over a certain number. So for that year's tax assessment, everybody has an entry about how many pigs they owned. And no other tax assessment had anything about pigs. So it was like really weird. Why are we talking about pigs? But then we found out, oh, there was a law passed that year, and that's why they had to ask that question. So again, who knows what other information might include, but if you find it there, but it's that Maryland State Archives index to government records that'll tell you what is available on that level. Again, when it comes to permits, obviously, if they keep them, it's going to be on a municipal level. There's no permits have been going up to the state level. When you look in the government records index on the state archives website, they do have permits, but those are all from like the beginning of Maryland, like the 1600s, or they're just for Annapolis. It's not for the rest of everyone. So like permits, it's going to be at your local municipality if they happen to keep those.
What about houses? For instance, I have a very historic house across the street from me,
Mm-hmm.
and they think because my basement is so old that was probably the kitchen for that house.
Oh.
I would have to reference that house
Well,
and then look into my
yeah.
house.
I mean, if
because
you
my
do-
house is much later.
yeah, if you do your deed research, if that is true, you'll get to a point where the deed is, where this has been subdivided out from that main property. So yeah, I mean, if you start with either of your properties and go back, if that happened, you should find that deed. But atlases and maps will also be able to tell you that information if you go back early enough.
Because we've had artifacts found on the property to
Interesting.
go back to before 1800, and yet the house is 1885 supposedly.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean,
And it's
that's
right downtown.
that's exactly, we want to do the full deed on chain on that, and then the map thing, and that should, those two steps should totally give us that answer. That's very interesting. But also, things moved, people stole things, you know what I mean? Like,
I mean, the house
like,
could have been moved there too, it could have been.
that it could have been
moved
moved.
from some
People,
other place.
that's a fun thing. You know, it's so expensive to move things now, and it's like we only save it for the most whatever. People moved buildings all the time back in the day. Like, and especially from my experience so far, I think every story I've heard from like a family telling me about their ancestral home has involved moving a building. So that's incredibly common too. So again, the hopefully there would be something in the deeds and maps that would give us that. Let me know if you need help with that. That sounds very interesting.
I got some help right here.
Yes, your local level assistance, that is where. And there's a very, very economical pricing schedule for their assistance. Highly recommend. All right, so that is tax assessments and permits. And now let's talk about the people data, more to the census and newspapers, publications, and images. Census records, obviously, our federal census every 10 years is going to tell you who lives in the places. The thing is that it's not until the invention of the phone in the cars that we actually start seeing addresses in the census data. So that is why I always leave census for the end, is because there is nothing on here that tells you that they are living in your house. What they will have here at the top is going to be their family number, the house number, or the individual number. They change the name every so often. But that is that dude, that census worker walking down the street, family number 5, or house number 5, and there's 5 families. You're the 6th family I've talked to. That's what those numbers mean. Again, it's not until we start having the technology of telephones and the car, where now your address is your identifier, that they start writing on the side what street they're on. Maybe they'll put a house number. I had a property that I was researching. It was an 1850 census, and it didn't have street names on it, but I found my person's name. But because I had done all of the deed research and I had done all the map research, I knew who all of her neighbors were. So I was able to see, because it was a townhouse and she owned both sides of the townhouse, so I could see, here's her next door neighbor, here's her other next door neighbor, so then all those people in between were everyone living in her house on both sides of the thing. And she was running a brothel, so it was just like 16 girls of varying ages, so it was like, well, obviously this is the house. It's my favorite story. We'll talk about more later. So again, having all of those other context clues will help you figure out if you have the right person here. Yeah, and so then this is gonna, again, if you are lucky enough that it is the same, it's the same owner and they're actually living in it, then you'll be able to see who that person has in their family and all that yummy goodness. If it's a rental, then you're going to have to maybe do some newspaper searching before you can go to the census, because you need to search that address in the newspapers to see if anyone was mentioned in a newspaper. They love telling people where they live when they talk about crimes and things. So there might be a mention that someone got a marriage certificate at this address, and then you can pull it up in the census and see who's living in there. And maybe one of the names will make sense and stuff like that. This used to be way harder back in the day because it was paper records. Now we're blessed with the Mormons having inventoried everything for us and scanned everything. If you weren't aware, that's Ancestry.com, FamilySearch.com. They're all owned by the same company now. Not even Ancestry. They sold it to some clandestine data company, so it's a little hairy now ethically, but whatever, everybody knows everything about everybody now. It's all the same websites. So whether you're looking at Ancestry.com or Family Search, it is the same data and website. Their websites look a little bit different, but their search box is the same exact search box. It's the same data. Family Search allows you to go on the back end a little bit easier. You can look up by municipality and location and be able to see all of the rolls of film that they have for that locale. You can't do that in Ancestry. You have to use the search bar. But if you play around with Family Search website enough, you'll find that back entrance to be able to find the index of what's there. It's been a minute since I've done that myself, so I can't walk you through the steps right now, but I know that I have bookmarked all of the links that bring me right to the list of what available records for Maryland. So again, back in the day, you'd have to do this complicated index to look through the census, and it was a nightmare of figuring out which district and blah, blah, blah. The gorgeousness of the internet, you just have to put in the names and it'll do all the work for you. Again, it's just, who knows if this is the right person, which Jacob Engelheimer is the one that I'm looking for, right? So having all of those other details will definitely help you. You might find the name of the person that you're looking for, but then look at the dates and realize it's impossible that that is the same person. They no longer owned it, or they died, or whatever. So that is census records, quicklies. And then here we are with newspapers and stuff. Obviously, newspapers.com, which again was bought by Ancestry, which is now owned by whatever that big company is. Newspapers.com, I use it almost on a daily basis. It's so easy and great. It is a paid service. The public library systems in Maryland give you free access to newspapers.com. Depending on which library you're accessing it through, you might have to be on their Wi-Fi. But most of them do allow you to access it from home. You just have to put in your library card number. And again, when you're searching, especially in newspapers.com, but generally any of these websites, and we'll talk about the other ones too, you have to keep in mind that language has evolved, right? We don't talk and write newspaper articles the same way that we used to back in the day. So especially, if you're just searching names of addresses, individual people's names, that's pretty straightforward. But if there is some sort of sensational story with your house, or some sort of bit of information that you are trying to track down, you have to be imaginative with your wording so that you're phrasing it in the way that they might be phrasing it, and talking about it so that you can find that. My example is my brothel that I was researching on, right? So the woman who owned it, that built it, her name was Quirk. Actually, wait, before I do that, her name was Eliza, and so when we were searching for her information, there's a lot of euphemisms that they use for brothels and for being arrested for sex work. So pretty much every time that I would go into newspapers.com, I'd pick a different phrase and find a brand new thing that I didn't see before, because this article used disorderly house, this newspaper, but this newspaper uses a different word for that, or even more weird euphemisms, and I'm never going to find those articles. And then with her name, too, important to understand, it's all AI searching, right? It's a computer saying that that is the word that you're looking for. There's not a standardized font, right? Now, today, we have all of this information of knowing that certain types of fonts are easier to read for more people, and we have the accessibility aspect with our language. That did not exist before 1970, right? So her name was Quirk with a Q. AI can't read Qs. If it's a curly Q, if it's a weird font, they're not going to be able to understand what that says. So again, every time I would search her name, every couple of months, I'd find brand new ones because the AI got smarter at reading the word Quirk. So keep that again in your mind. It's not the magic of computers on TV and movies. You have to work it to make it work for you. But on newspapers.com, you can clip and download the sources. It's so nice and easy. Again, Library of Congress, because we are just so close, there is so much about Maryland in the Library of Congress, and especially with things associated with the Bay and Waterman and that kind of history, and especially with you guys being, this general area being some of the earliest landed places by Europeaners, there's a lot of stuff for areas here. So again, definitely consult that and check. There's a variety of different ways to look and search through their website. It's pretty straightforward, just normal website searching type stuff. But a lot of it is going to be digital. Some of it you might need to go to DC to look at it. But a lot of it is digital. I mean, especially all the Habs photographs. The 30s, during the Depression, to put all the architects and everybody back to work, they went around and documented buildings. And that program still exists today. I did an internship with it during grad school. And there's like large format cameras. There's a whole way that we document these buildings. All of those pictures are online. Again, because we're so close to DC, all those Maryland houses got pictured first. Before they went out to the rest of the country. So there are tons of Habs photos, beautiful, high format, high res, gorgeous black and white images of our oldest buildings here in Maryland. So that's an amazing resource. Internet Archive and HathiTrust are kind of very similar, if not even combined now. I think they might have even have some overlap and sharing things or whatever. HathiTrust is going to be kind of, they partner with academic libraries and university libraries. So when you search there, you're searching like 5,000 different academic libraries across the world, honestly. So that can be really noisy when you're searching that site. So that one is definitely, you're searching particular people's names, you're searching specific addresses, specific places, because that is gonna, I mean, we're working on a project about the history of alcohol production in Maryland, and I put like, I thought I was being very specific, and I put in something about alcohol production, and it came back with 2 million results. I'm not looking through 2 million results. And some of them are going to be journals, some of them are going to be research papers, some of them are going to be images, some of them are going to be historical documents. So you really got to use the filters and like work it. But there's crazy weird stuff that you're going to find there that you would never find other places. I was working on a building that was an ice cream factory from the 20s, and it was highlighted in like a engineering magazine from the 1920s, and it had these great photographs of the interior of the ice cream production spaces. So again, like that kind of stuff you can find in that. And the same with Internet Archive, and Internet Archive can also help in just your regular life too. It's an archive of the internet, so you can go to a particular website at a particular time. So there might have been some GeoSites, Angel Fire, beginning of the internet 1992 website that had information, but it's not loading for you right now. You can go to the Internet Archive and look at it from the last time they took a snapshot of that website. It's pretty awesome. And especially today with all the funniness happening at the federal government, it's really great to be able to go backwards and see what changes have been made and things like that. So Internet Archive is awesome. And then Google Books and HathiTrust are actually in partners now, I believe. So whatever you can find on Google Books is pretty much what you'll find there, and vice versa. But Google Books is the same. It's the Google search thing, but it's partners with all these different libraries across the world. So again, want to be very specific when you search in Google Books, because you could get millions upon millions of results if you put in something very generic. These are just like the big spots to hit. There's certainly going to be lots of different regional weird things that pop up. Our local historical societies and other types of institutions will have their own collections. Something that's really interesting that gets lost in the shuffle a lot is back in the day, before we had these archives and like the system that we collect our memories now, a lot of public librarians would keep scrapbooks of the newspaper of the day. And so again, they would have these just big, huge scrapbooks, and they would cut out the articles from the newspaper, put it in there, but they would have like this standard organizing system. So all the church articles would go together, all the animal articles, whatever. So a lot of times in these Maryland rooms, these local history rooms, it's not just the conventional indexes and things like that. They might have their own homemade scrapbooks of important things that happen in the community. Those rarely get scanned or digitized in any sort of way. So that's an amazing resource there too. There is a website that is in New York. It's based in New York. It's called Fulton Postcard, like Fulton, like the steam engine Fulton. And it's this crazy dude who worked at IBM, retired, and started researching things. And he has this crazy high-speed scanner and millions upon millions of terabytes of space, and he is just scanning every historic newspaper that he can find. So he has his own website. It's mostly New York State and New England, but I've definitely checked it a couple times since I moved to Maryland, and there's some Maryland-based newspapers in there. Obviously, you could still get them through newspapers.com, but just to say that, like, everyone loves history. Who knows what someone has done to index and do that work on their own on the internet? So just doing those general internet searches to see what crazy weird things that someone else passionate about the same thing that you're passionate about might have collected already. So there's lots of hidden information everywhere. And with that, again, just plugging that property research guide that literally goes through everything that we just talked about with the clickable links to those locations. Check out that blog. And now we can have questions, more questions. Thank you guys.
Yeah.